Welcome back to another episode of the Hopecast with your hosts, Richard and Steve. How's
Hi.
it going, Steve? Today we have a fellow, I don't know, I don't know,
Prostate cancer candidate.
can't, yeah,
You,
uh,
this
Mark.
is Mark. And
Cancer ward.
how do you pronounce your last name?
So today we have good news, we have bad news, and we have, I don't know,
Just news.
Just
That's just the
news.
way it is. Yeah. Well, we have invited people to join us, and Mark, I want to thank you for doing this. This is important because we share our stories, our journey with this, but everything is individualized. Everything's a little bit different. So why don't we back up to when you first said, "Uh-oh, what do you mean PSA?" I'm guessing that was your first indication.
Yes, it was. I'm going back 5.5, 6 years ago. I thought I pulled a groin muscle at my daughter's wedding. I had it happen once before, but it went away. This didn't go away. So within 4 days, I went and saw my primary doctor. He suggested I go see a urologist, and a urologist basically did a PSA test. My PSA was 7.8. He went in and did a DRE. He didn't like what he felt, and then he went in and performed a biopsy. My biopsy came back at a Gleason 844, and right away he was pushing for radiation. And I started raising a bunch of questions because that's the type of person I am, and he wasn't giving me any answers. So I left that meeting and I called up my kids and I told my kids what transpired. My daughter's into yoga and health styles, and she knows several people that had prostate issues. She called one that was close by and he recommended a surgeon. Well, it wasn't a surgeon, he was a urological oncologist. Okay. And I thought that would be best because it's a urologist that deals with cancer.
Right. And he can represent both sides of that and answer all
Yeah,
your questions better than
exactly.
right. Okay.
And I went and saw him, and he spent 2.5 hours with me going over all the issues. He didn't check anything. He just read the individual biopsy report, and he left it up to me whether I wanted to do radiation or surgery. But during that 2.5 hours, he told me the pros and cons of each of the treatments, as well as the 3, 5, and 10-year side effects, whether they were good or bad. He didn't hold anything back. And he also said that a lot of people don't get all of the side effects. It's something that is unique to each individual.
Right. You don't know what cards you're going to get dealt until they
Right.
deal it
Yeah.
to you. Right.
And considering I was 66 at the time, I says I'll go with the surgery. I could basically, if I get all those bad side effects, I could live with it. I had my surgery, and as soon as I recovered and I was in the room, he came and paid a visit to me, and he told me that I had bladder cancer that he took care of while he was doing the surgery. I never dawned on me to ask him at that point in time how they found out that I had bladder cancer. But later on, I questioned him, and he says that when they basically pull the prostate out, they drain the bladder of the fluid because they have to cut the urethra. Well, the bottom line is they also do a cytology on the individual bladder fluid. And that's when it came back that I had the cancer. He stuck a scope in, and it was off of a nodule growing off of the wall, and it did not penetrate the wall.
So they caught it early because you opted to do surgery.
Exactly.
Wow.
My question to him when I was in the hospital was, why didn't all the pre-testing pick it up? And he says it was too small to get picked up on, and everybody was looking for prostate. They weren't looking for bladder cancer. So I had the surgery done. I was out the next day, and when I went to my next office visit, my next office visit was 30 days downstream, but he did another cystoscopy, and in it, he removed the rest of that nodule and that rest of that in the bladder.
Right. And he
And
confirmed that it was cancer. The part he took, he was just testing.
right.
Right.
And the part that he removed the second time basically was all benign. So I was under observation every 3 months for about a year and a half. Then it went to every 6 months for a year and a half. And then after that, I was put on 1 year visits. And every year, I've had the bladder checked out, and it hasn't come back. And after 2.5 years, my PSA was no longer undetectable, but the individual doubling rate was more than 3 years.
Okay.
So right now my PSA is 0.033. And he said by the time he won't do anything until it hits 0.2. And he says, considering the fact that my pathology report showed that it was completely self-contained, there was nothing outside the margins, nothing outside the prostate. It was the ideal situation. He says there's no reason to jump at anything. During our conversations, he also explained that there's other organs in the body that produce microscopic amounts of PSA. And he says that could be it. He says, and it also could be part of the individual prostate going back. He says, so the bottom line is we just monitor it. And if he does jump the gun and do a PSM at 0.2, you only have a 35% accuracy because of the fact that it takes a larger PSA to pinpoint if you were fully contained as my condition was.
Right. See, and this is where we try to educate people on the fact that everyone is individual. You got to do this because it was contained, because it didn't have anything outside the margins. You were
Exactly.
clear, but they have the bladder cancer. Now, the prostate's sitting right underneath the bladder. When they cut through, you could have had invasion there. You didn't. And so when they tested this, now, I do have some questions for you. When you had your surgery, did they lay you open, or how did they perform that surgery?
It was performed through the robot. It was a laparoscopic.
So
I had 5 incisions, small incisions. The biggest one being just to the right of my belly button.
Yeah, that's where the biggest one, where they remove it. But so you did this 6 years ago with your surgery?
5.5 years ago right now. Yeah.
All right. And so you did robotics. So that wasn't really, really common. If you would have had this 5-10 years prior to that, that wasn't a thing. So you were able to get in and get out. And while they were in there, they were able to at least sample. But they didn't do a scan prior to the biopsy. It wasn't like the MRI guided biopsy. They just went in and
No, at that time, the MRI guided biopsy was not the focus like they do now.
right.
Uh,
Things are changing. So I mean,
yeah. The only scans that I had was a nuclear bone scan and an MRI.
Okay.
Oh.
All right. Very nice. Now, see, it's weird in that short amount of time frame. And we talked about when things started getting developed and doctors that were doing this going, no, I was with the guy that was teaching everyone how to do the robotic surgery. And now they have a new biopsy tool that we'll have to talk about at some point that they said is less invasive. It's easier for them to guide it. It fits on their fingers, so they're not dealing with tubes and going through all of that rectally. It's, they go in between surgically, but they said that they can pinpoint it and pull out exactly what they need. And I go, this is all new stuff, but there were like 10 things that they listed that were changing, because once you hear prostate cancer, your brain researches prostate cancer. You did a ton of research prior to your surgery? Yes.
I did. And I also belong to a users group, Prostate Cancer Warriors, on Facebook. Most of the people that are on there are basically stage 4. So I pick up a lot of information from them. And when I see my doctor yearly, I have a list of questions that I go through with them. And a lot of times he looks at me and he says, where do you pick this stuff up from? He says, normally, my patients don't ask questions like you do. And I told him, I says, well, if I feel that if I could help somebody, even if it's just by talking to them and telling them, don't jump the gun with, letting your mind wander, wait until you get your test results and that type of scenario. It benefits me because it makes me feel good, but it's also, I know what I went through when they were going through that stage.
Right.
So
no, and that's exactly what we're trying to do with this, is just educate people, tell stories. There's a little humor involved in what we do. Sometimes we get off track and talk food, but it's important to understand that your journey is specifically your journey. Now,
it is.
did you make any lifestyle changes when you found out you had cancer?
I wouldn't say major changes. I was, I'm single, so if I sit down and I make a meal, I have a tendency of eating all my vegetables today. So
Right.
when I'm hungry tomorrow, I'll grab a piece of pork chop with a piece of steak and maybe grab, a salad with it.
Okay.
But I'm not doing the full blown Mediterranean type of diet.
Right.
If I eat anything, my meat or anything is basically the size of my palm, and then my vegetables and everything else is basically double that.
Right.
My breads are now multi-grain breads.
Okay. So you're making conscious decisions to be a little healthier, but still eat what you enjoy eating. How about alcoholic beverages?
I did not make a major change with that, but about 4 months ago, I met a woman that we started going out and got serious, and she doesn't drink, so I don't drink. So
There
when
you
we
go.
go out for dinner, but I had a birthday party and I had 4 glasses of wine on Saturday, so in between I make up for it.
There you go. But yeah,
So you're
4
single.
Yeah.
What about? Oh, good.
No, you go ahead. I know where you're going with
I
that.
just had a question about being single, and was anybody with you during your time, your surgery and healing, or were you home by yourself?
I was going out with a woman at the time, and my surgery ended our relationship. I'm saying that because of the fact that she never came to the hospital, even though it was a day. My kids took me there. My kids brought me back. When I was home, the first week, she never came down. I called her up and basically said, I'm over here. I can't, go out or anything. Are you going to come and see me? And her exact words were, I thought you would come and see me when you feel better.
What?
Well, you know what? That's easy right there. Thanks
Yeah.
for the help. So did you have family, somebody helping you through this?
My son basically took off from work for a week.
Okay.
Used his vacation time. I sent him home during the second day. I didn't really need him. I was able to walk around. I didn't have any issue with the catheter and emptying it or changing bags, because I did change the bags. I thought it was more convenient using the leg bag during the day. I did rely on him because I needed to do some field work for work. And instead of bothering the work, since it was close by the house, I had him drive me over, and I'm walking around the site. And my son says, shouldn't you be home?
Yes.
And I told him, if I feel something's wrong, I says, I'm going to go home.
Right.
I
understand. You get crazy sitting around. If you're an active person, you want to be active.
Exactly.
But it's easy to overdo it. I feel pretty good, and it sets you back the next day or whatever. But very positive attitude with all of this. Now, dating life with the side effects of prostate cancer. Did you have to have any of those side effects, and how did you explain to people about it if you did?
I told people what the side effects were of cancer.
Right.
Including incontinence and ED. My individual issue with incontinence lasted 7 months. After my surgery, I developed an incarcerated inguinal hernia, and I couldn't get it taken care of because of COVID.
Oh boy.
And when I found somebody that would repair it, I had it done, and it was like immediately my incontinence basically went up to like 95 to 98%. I kidded myself. I basically said I needed a facelift down there to tighten everything up so that this way.
Boy, boy.
The ED, I had ED for just under 2 years. I still I still don't get a full blown erection like I did before, but it does respond. It does basically, and if I need any help, I basically have Cialis that, and the doctor says there shouldn't be any reason. Testosterone is not high, it's just at the low bottom level. I think it was like 254 last time I had it tested. He says, but also realize that, you're older than you were before, and
Yeah.
I didn't date anybody until 3 months ago. So,
All right. Well, I was just wondering if it would be a hard discussion to have with someone, because obviously that's part of what people think about, right? It's a scary thing when people are putting their health behind those things. They're worried about. I go, man, you're alive. If you have to wear a diaper, if you have to wear, the pads for a while until you get it figured out, that's okay. You have to do that. ED is not the end all. There's other things that they can do for it, but having to explain that to a new potential partner, it's a tough road, I would assume, trying to breach that subject.
well, I think it's a tough road at my age, dating, period.
Yeah.
Right.
I've been basically divorced for over 27 years. So I've developed my own, I wouldn't say, how could I say it? I've replaced intimacy with activities like playing golf, tennis, and enjoying more activity.
Going fishing. Let's hear it. Yeah, all of those retirement goals. Yeah, that's what you're doing now.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it.
And I made sure that, I'm now retired. I've been retired for almost 4.5 years, but I made sure that I didn't want this prostate issue basically interfering with that, because it took me almost 2 years to work through everything since I had the surgery.
And you had complications on the backside with other cancers, so that complicates things as well. So
Well,
your children, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I was going to ask about family history. Did your father have that, a grandfather, your kids, uncles?
my sister's a registered nurse,
Uh-huh.
and she went into a genetics counselor to check on her. And my sister looked at me and said that I'm the missing link in the family. And I says, what makes you say that? And she said, my genetic counselor said that. With the other group that I belong to, I started talking about genetics because I never had that tested. One of the fellows made a comment that it's beneficial to get the genetic testing, because if your cancer comes back, there's certain certain genes that they're able to treat with different treatments.
Right, different markers.
All right. So it's better to know than not to know. But during my research, I found out that there was over 230 genes that focus on prostate cancer. And when they do with genetics, they're only testing somewhere like about 21 to 30 of them. So they're not testing the full genetics.
Okay.
But I had the initial genetics testing done, and it basically showed that none of the genes were malformed.
Okay, so you didn't have anything that says yours is linked to possibly a breast cancer
No.
on your... Okay, see.
But they did say that there was one that was not normal. And they used a certain term, I forget what it was now, but when I questioned them, they said that they don't have enough information to basically say whether it's basically something to be concerned about or not.
Right.
But when I looked up that gene had to do with bladder cancer.
Okay.
Okay, so it didn't have anything to do with the prostate.
Sure. But because of the prostate, they found that now. Is that something that your children could get?
I gave my kids all of the information, and I told them that if they need to get they're concerned about getting tested, that you should get tested where I got, because they basically give like 50% off on cost to family members as a follow-up. I don't know if my daughter ever did, but I was on my son to get his PSA tested, because my son was basically at that time over 45.
Hmm.
His PSA is basically normal, very low, and he doesn't have an issue. And I
Right.
told him, I says, make sure you follow up on it because it could happen overnight.
It can be a little sneaky, yeah. And that's that yearly blood work. Just,
Yeah.
especially if it's in the family, you want to start it early. And I told my son to do it, and he's not even 30 yet. And I said, get a baseline, find out what's going on. It's not going to hurt anything when they do your blood work every year to say add a PSA, whatever it
Yeah.
costs, just add that to it.
And if your insurance doesn't cost it, it's a $20-$30 cost. So
Yeah.
it's not a major issue.
That's
As
true.
far as family goes, I have a listing of cancer in the family, but there was only one uncle that basically had prostate cancer.
Right.
And according to something I read, had for it to be passed down genetically, there had to be 2 or 3 relatives within
So many generations.
2 generations that basically have that happen. And I only had one uncle that had it, and he had the seeds put in, and when he died he never had any additional treatment. My father had an enlarged prostate. My
Okay.
brother has an enlarged prostate. I have a cousin that found out that he has prostate cancer,
Uh-oh.
but he's a Gleason 6, so he's basically doing active surveillance. My grandfather on my dad's side basically died from colon cancer. I had several cousins that on their mother's side, which was not directly related to our family, they had breast cancer. There was 2 of them.
Right.
Now,
That's my fear now, is that my children are going to, end up with this. Man, a lot of weird things you can pass down to your children. I said, you didn't think of that before you had children. That wasn't what was on your mind at the time. And now they're stuck with, some of these genes that could potentially cause issues. I said, stay on top of it. Know what you're dealing with. Know the odds. Make sure you're getting checked. And so 2 sons, they're going to do it. My brother said, my PSA is so low, it's, it's like 0.08 or whatever, it's on the chart. But a 0.8 at his age or whatever it is a good number. But mine went up drastically. They said it's aggressive. We shared before we started talking. They found something during the PSMA that they said, you have some spots on your lungs that you're going to have more imaging and further testing on. I go, what the heck are you seeing? But anyhow, that was there. So apparently I have to watch that now as well. But radiation will start probably in 3 weeks, would be my guess. We're still waiting on the Decipher test, which is that in-depth, gene test that they're going to go through. But on your pathology, on the backside of your surgery, did they say what percentage of your prostate was affected?
the cancer was basically less than 25%.
That's awesome.
So,
and they caught this with the PSA test.
Yeah. And the one thing that I have to say that was negative about me is I never had a PSA test before that.
Do it.
I was a firm believer that listen to your body, and if your body tells you something, then have it checked out. And I had no trouble with my urination flow until I had that, groin pull.
Right.
That's what with the trigger. So I had no idea what my initial PSA ever was.
Right. So they only did the one, and that started the ball rolling. So you had to have all the other testing.
Exactly.
It
And,
is
I tell people, somebody takes a PSA test and it basically is over 4. And right away they panic. And I says, don't panic. I says, what did you do before your individual test?
Yep.
Well, I was riding a bike yesterday and I went to the gym this morning and I was doing the weights and everything. I says, both of those items affect your PSA. I says, so give yourself a week at least. Don't do any of that. Go and get it tested again and then see what's going on.
And they're not looking for one spike, because that could be, you and your wife or girlfriend,
Yeah.
any of those things can raise the PSA, but they're looking for that continuation of a rise. They want to know the doubling rate. They want to know one spike and you go, oh no. And a PSA, it could be like in the case of, you said your dad and your brother, or your dad and your uncle, enlarged prostate. And when you get older, that happens and the flow goes, and you go, wait, why am I peeing on my shoe? And it's something that happens it doesn't mean that you have prostate cancer. It
Exactly.
doesn't mean you have prostate cancer if your PSA is elevated. They're little pieces of the puzzle. I didn't have any symptoms. I wasn't waking up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom unless I'd been drinking. And then, you do that 2-3 o'clock in the morning wake up. But it wasn't anything that I thought I had an issue with. And mine was to the point I had a big mass. And they said, we're going to have to get rid of that. And then on the backside, they tell me, well, we figured that it was probably going to be outside the margins, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to deal with it. You guys, we deal with this forever. And that's what people need to understand. And you're going to be a little anxious, maybe a little crabby, however that comes out before the test results. Then waiting on the other test results. Then you get some like mine where you go, I don't know. That just made me have more questions. But one at a time, you have to deal with these things. And so 8 weeks, I'm going to be driving, 3+ hours a day to get back and forth to these appointments for 2 months. And I said, that's going to be an expense. That's going to be, and all of these things that have to play into the decisions that you make. And one of those shouldn't be because you have to decide your treatment option because of your location and because of money. That sucks to me.
Yeah, that's
and
another
like,
issue.
yeah, it's like you said, sometimes the insurance won't cover the test your doctor orders. And you go, what do? You pay $2,000, $3,000 out of pocket to get that test done? I mean, this Decipher test is freaking stupid expensive. I mean, it's an expensive test, and I couldn't have done that without the insurance doing it. But at some point, I want to get to the test it once a year and watch it. Yours, over that time frame, you said it's at a 0.04 now.
Yeah, below 0.033.
Okay, so
Nope.
and from the time it started being detected to now, how long has transpired in between that?
3 years.
3 years. Okay. So a question I'm going to ask everybody. What do you think? Did Joe Biden know he had prostate cancer before he left office?
You had to.
Yes. That's what we said. You know what? As much as we want to give you, no, it doesn't get that crazy and go stage 4. You had tests when you were in the Oval Office. So, all right. I just wanted to know what your opinion was on that.
My thinking is every president has a health check every year.
Multiple
And for,
times. Yeah.
and for them at that level not to know or do a PSA test and not know that he has cancer, you can't. I'm not buying it, period.
Yeah. And he's been as a public figure. Come on, when he was vice president, whenever he had to be under 75, which was when he was VP, right? I think he was under that. He had it then, and it's not going to go from not being detectable or being in that correct range to being where he is now, stage 4 in the bones, spread everywhere. Now it's chemo. Now it's completely different things that you have to do. I don't know. I want to know the guy that did the Dilbert cartoon. Did he know, and when did he find out? He had the same numbers, same type of thing, and you go, individual case, you can't compare those, Steve. You just said you can't, and now you did it. And I don't know.
I'm Wednesday night. There's another prostate group that I basically I'm involved with, and there's a fella down from not Missouri, west of Texas, but he found out he had cancer when the doctor looked at his neck and he says, I don't like that. And he did a biopsy and it was prostate cancer.
It had already gotten into his neck.
It was already
everywhere.
Yeah, through his system. And he's doing good.
Right.
He sometimes you could tell that the medications are getting to him. But if they are, he just basically says, I have to leave. my body can't take it today, and he signs off. There was another fellow from San Diego that basically was going through chemo, and when he came on, I looked and I said, I can't believe it's the same guy. It looked like the Grim Reaper was standing next to him. And 3 weeks ago, a bunch of us got together in Connecticut, and he was the life of the party, and he came through it after the treatment. But it's the bottom line is that once you find out that you have it, you never get rid of it. Even if it's NED, no evidence of disease, you still basically do your yearly monitoring. If there's something, you basically, shorten the schedule up. I'm lucky in the fact that the doctor that I deal with in his facility, they're involved also with Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York. And they're also involved with Lombardi Cancer Center down in D.C. So I look at it that I don't have one facility. I have 3 different facilities that I'm working with.
There you go.
So
yeah, it's you have to choose the right doctor.
Yeah, it's just.
And once you find the one that you can talk to and you go, whoa, and this time I said, I'm not doing what I did last time. I had to make a decision. Now, how long did it take you to decide if you were going to do radiation or if you were going to go ahead and have the prostatectomy?
I had the radiation diagnosed about a week before I went in and had my appointment with the oncologist. And when the oncologist told me everything, I asked him if he could give us some time to discuss because my daughter and my son were with me.
Right.
And they left it up to me. But when I said I'm going to have the surgery, they both said that that's what they wanted. And I said that and made my decision within a week. And my surgery was done within a month and a half after that.
A month and a half?
Yeah, a month and a half after that.
Wow, that's pretty quick.
It is.
Well, because of the Gleason 8 on the biopsy report, he did not want to basically take a chance. So we booked the surgery, but he told me specifically that if any of the MRI or the bone scan shows that it's outside the prostate, surgery is off the table. And because of having a good result on both of those tests, we went ahead with the surgery.
All right. Now, I would ask you if you had any regrets with your decision, but your decision caused you to find the bladder cancer, so you're going to say no. But if you could take that off the table, and I know that's hard, any regrets for doing it?
Sometimes I do, because since I had the surgery, I put on another 20 pounds. And with putting on the 20 pounds, I now have stress incontinence. Infrequently, but I do have it.
Right.
And I think to myself, did I do the right treatment? But like you said, I think about finding the bladder cancer. And I says, no, I did the right treatment. Because if I didn't do that, I would have never found the bladder cancer. So
I can't imagine them going in. Well, I don't know. You'd already had the imaging. They would go in and line everything up, and you would do that. And what would have happened? I don't know what the radiation would have done to make bladder cancer be worse. I don't know how that all works, but they aren't targeting your bladder. They're protecting it. And so you would have been down a weird road. So finding that, obviously the blessing in all of this, the silver lining in the cloud, is you found another cancer that you took care of, and you're here talking to us 6 years later going, hey, this is cool. I don't think even with all of my issues, there's no way I would have done it different.
Yeah. I mean, I'm 70. I'll be 72 next week. I'm playing tennis. I just started playing pickleball. This woman's going to kill me, and she's not even on my will. But I'm still trying to play golf. I mean, my game's not great, but I'm out there. I do the 18 holes, and I come home. So I'm enjoying my retirement the way I wanted to enjoy it. Now, the one thing that you touched on briefly is I had an MRI done about 3 years ago, and it basically showed that I had a spot on my liver and 3 spots on my lungs. And because of the fact that I had prostate cancer, they want to monitor that. And they've been monitoring it for 3 years, and it hasn't changed in any way, shape, or form.
Awesome. Thank you.
Now, I talked with my doctor, and I says, how about the spot on the liver? And he looked at it and he says, the spot on your liver is probably a cyst. He says the spots on your lung could have been from an infection. He says, did you ever have pneumonia? And I says, yeah. He says, well, it could be
Could
from
be
the
scar
pneumonia.
tissue. Right.
He says, so as long as it doesn't grow, he says, we don't worry about it. And for 3 years, it hasn't changed. But I get a yearly MRI now done too.
Well, Richard said his doctor told him, you let us worry about the cancer, you worry about living.
Yep.
And I think you're doing it, sir. I really enjoyed your story. I think there's a lot of positives in there and a lot of scary things that you talk through. But bottom line is you're here. You have a continuation with prostate cancer. You'll have that relationship for the rest of your life. But hopefully you don't have to deal with it anymore. Hopefully you're done with all that stuff and you can keep doing your thing. And you know what? Pickleball. Yeah, that's a little slower than the whole tennis thing. I think I'd go that route too.
No, it isn't.
Okay, it should be. It's little and you're hitting a little plastic thing with a little paddle. I can hit a tennis ball harder and faster than that.
Yeah, but the woman that I'm playing with, she's laying up, and I could tell, like, she'll hit the ball back to me and she'll put some spice on it. So when it hits, it basically goes off in the opposite direction. And I told her, I says, I thought you were supposed to be taking it easy on me. But the whole thing with pickleball, it's a faster response than the tennis ball, and it's a smaller court.
Right.
So, but I was told there's a lot of people in older age that have foot injuries that happen because of it. And I said, it's not going to happen to me because I have no problem giving you a point if you're putting it on the other side of the court.
Yeah, I'm not diving for anything.
Yeah, I'm not diving for it.
I hear you. Richard, what do you think?
I was just curious, how was your recovery after surgery? Were you pretty beat up, slow rolling?
I was beat up, yeah. Before my surgery, what I did before surgery, I found a video on YouTube that did the whole procedure. So I knew what was going to happen. I also knew what the after effects were and what was going to take.
Possibly. Right.
So I went in and bought food and made food and stocked my freezer with stuff that I wouldn't eat. I wasn't going to make gourmet meals, but my recovery was slow. When the doctor gave me the okay that I could go out and do a walk or whatever, I mentioned, how about playing golf? And he looked at me like I was nuts. I says, no, I'm not going to go walk an 18-hole course, but there's a 9-hole course that's a pitch and putt type of deal.
There you go.
And he says, yeah, if you want to. He says, but don't overextend yourself. And I says, no. And my son and I went there, and I had, a good time playing. And it was just one of those that, again, listen to your body and don't overdo it.
Yeah,
right.
I think it's, I don't know if funny is the right word, but when I get on the Facebook group that we all met in, I see some people, man, they really struggle with their surgery, and I'm thinking, I didn't even take a pain pill, so it's just weird how people react differently. Like some people are whining 6-7 months later, it still hurts. Like, I was up and about. Like, I didn't go back to work for 4 weeks. Yeah, I was slow rolling, but I had like zero pain. But it wasn't painful,
I had pain that woke me up one night, and I took an extra strength Tylenol, and that's the only thing I took during my recovery.
Yeah, same with me. I just took Tylenol.
Yeah, the pain medicine that they prescribed, I filled it, but I never took one.
Yeah, same with me. It's still sitting in my cabinet.
Now,
say that I'm asking crackhead break it in my house.
Mine stayed at the pharmacy.
I grabbed it, so my surgeon already knew that. I didn't want it, but he talked me into it. He said, fill it, take it home, just in case. And I never touched it. It's still sitting in the same exact spot for 2.5 months now.
Yeah.
One of the other things that I found out is when they prescribed it wasn't Cialis, it was the generic form of Viagra. I get tongue twisted with that when I try to say it, but they got it through their pharmacy, and it cost me $50 for 90 tablets. When I went to renew it, I renewed it through GoodRx,
Yeah.
and Good RX basically knocked it down to like $18.
Yeah.
So the one thing I tell everybody is if you have any prescription, first thing you do is check Good RX and take it from there.
Yeah. We talked about that a week or two ago.
Yeah, you brought that up. That's awesome.
So my
All right.
Cialis, my pharmacy wanted to charge me $3,000 for Cialis. I was like, what? So I just basically told him on the phone, I was like, hold on, don't do anything with it. Just hold on. I have a doctor's appointment in 2 days with my primary care. I want to see what he says. My primary care said, jump on Good RX and see what they charge there. It went from $3,000 to $19. I mean, that doesn't even make sense to me.
Well, that's the same way I'm on Medicare. And I look at the prices that the doctors charge and what Medicare approves. And I says, how could you have such a difference? I says, what happens to the people that are not on Medicare that have an insurance company, but it's not a good insurance company? What do they pay? But, again, I hear all things, people on Medicare that have a supplemental plan basically saying, yeah, I pay every month into that supplemental plan. But once I hit my deductible for my yearly medical, which is like $250, I don't pay anything the rest of the year. And then other people are basically saying, well, with the other plan, I have $5,000 worth of expenses this year. And I said, well, start using a calculator and figure out what's going to happen before you just arbitrarily pick a plan.
Yeah.
There you go. That's true. Well, a lot of people. I had a high deductible insurance plan and it cost me a bunch of money. I switched it because I was still in the hospital when my insurance rolled over, and I had changed it to another plan to make things a little more affordable. And it's a good thing because I was in the hospital for 2 weeks, went home, went back for a week and a half or whatever. It was dumb. A lot of weird complications on the backside. So catheter and all that stuff, it didn't affect me. The pain meds, I told them I don't want them. I was in the hospital. If something happened, I could have got them filled pretty quick. But it was to the point I didn't care. I want to be home. I want to get out of this silly hospital. And it was a bad thing because then I ended up getting right back in. But everyone has different things. That had nothing to do really with prostate cancer. That was just part of the surgery and, aspirating.
Byproduct.
Yeah. The byproduct of that was where your byproduct was finding out that you had bladder cancer as well. So you're always going to learn something, I guess, when they get in there and start digging around. But hopefully everybody's numbers can be normal. It's hard sometimes. I feel sorry for Steve, I don't want to be that way. But it's like, damn, you had it easy. What happened, But then I go, people really do feel guilty because when you look at people that are stage 4 that are dealing with all of this and their families right on the Facebook pages and they're devastated, they don't know what to do. I didn't have to deal with that. So now I'm all right. It's the hand that you were dealt. We started with that. I guess we can end with that. I fold. I don't want to play this game anymore, and you can't do that. You just have to keep sitting at the table going, what's next? Don't say that because
you're in this game. You're in this game for the duration.
That's right. And so you may as well try to get through it and help people learn more about it. And Mark, you did that for us today. Want to thank you for being part of this. Now, Richard, do you have some words of wisdom for us to end the show?
Yes, sir. But I also want to say we are at 184 downloads right now. This is a fairly new podcast, so 184 I think is pretty good.
No, that's cool.
If you made it this far, please hit the subscribe button, like, share. I love getting information out, so share.
There you go.
But yes, my words of wisdom are smart. I highlighted it dark colors, but now I can't see it. My old ass. Stay strong, stay informed, and above all, stay hopeful.
There you go. That's what we do here on the Hopecast. Mark, thank you again. Richard, you be good. Until next time, everyone. See ya.
Peace.
Thank you for having me.
Stick around for 2 seconds, Mark.
Here. Yeah, just hang on.
You didn't listen.